Welcome to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks, a show that provides extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers.
Hello, this is JJ Rory, Vice President at Sequent Learning Networks. In our Masters of Product Management podcast, we tap into the experiences of people who work in and around product management to help you learn and grow in your product management career. You know, there are a few things that can make a bigger impact on the ultimate success of your product than a true deep understanding of your customers. Without first understanding your customers' problems, situations, the markets in which they do business, their unmet needs, etc., it's really just a matter of luck if we end up with a successful product. This foundation of customer insights is paramount to long-term success with your products. So today's conversation is all about the importance of user interviews and customer research in order to set that foundation of understanding your customers. I'm really excited about my guest today, who's here to share her insights and experiences in this area. Keerthi Hoback is Senior Director of Product Management at Major League Baseball, where she is responsible for driving subscription growth and fan engagement on MLB TV, the league's direct-to-consumer streaming platform for watching live baseball. Prior to MLB, she worked at the BBC and a streaming startup when streaming was barely a thing. First of all, go Cubs, go Yankees. And second of all, Keerthi, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thrilled to be here, JJ.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. Okay, so before, I had to throw in, by the way, my two teams. Before we get to the discussion on customer research, which is, of course, why we're here, I love the story you once told me. I gave your bio, but tell us about the time when the recruiter called you about the MLB role that you're in now. Share that story with us.
Absolutely. So I had just moved to New York. It was about 8 or 9 years ago. And before that, I was living in London and I grew up in India. So I knew nothing about baseball. I had never even watched a game in my life. In fact, there's this funny story where my husband gifted me a baseball cap when we first met, and it had the White Sox logo on it. And if you look at it for the first time, and you should try this, if you look at it for the first time with how the word SOX is written in Old English font, and if you've never seen it before, it actually looks like SEX. And I said to my husband,
that was a bold first move.
And I said to my husband, you really want me to wear a cap that says sex on it? So yeah, that's how little I knew about baseball. So anyway,
that's fabulous.
This recruiter called me. I had just begun looking for jobs in New York, and he mentioned the role was for MLB, but I did not know what MLB was. The role, though, was very interesting, seemed like a great fit for my past experience. So we got off the phone and I told my husband, and his jaw dropped. Like, he grew up in the US and he is a huge baseball fan. So working at MLB was really his dream job. So if he couldn't work for Major League Baseball, he at least wanted me to work for Major League Baseball. And I thought, okay, this is a long shot. But I had my husband teach me everything about baseball in one weekend. And, I figured even if I didn't get the job, it was still a great way to learn something that my husband enjoyed and a big part of the culture for my new home country. So at the interview, when they asked me about it, I spoke about teams, the draft, trades, stuff really even a casual fan wouldn't know. And I got the job. I got the job because of that effort to prepare. And sometimes, that preparation is really more important than being a subject matter expert.
Yeah, I just love that story. That's so fabulous. And I hadn't even heard the one about the hat, so that's even better. So again, just to follow up on that, because I think it's really important, and I think a lot of folks out there listening have been in new domains. And so you get the job, which is awesome because your cram session with your husband, which is just a fabulous story. But then you got to get into this new domain, right? So how did you deal with being in this domain where I have to assume most of the people at MLB, knew baseball backwards and forwards? So how did you deal with this once you got into the role?
Oh, yeah, this happened all the time. I would be in meetings with senior baseball executives, not a lot of diversity, and we would be talking about hardcore baseball topics. And I was always terrified that I would be discovered, for sort of faking it. And I didn't realize until much later that there was a term for this, and it's called imposter syndrome. And
Mm.
I wasn't the only one who had this. It's actually very common among women and men too. And it's this feeling that you don't deserve to be here. And I think even becoming aware of this concept and aware that it's so common, coupled with other cultural changes that were happening in the industry and at MLB, really helped me overcome this feeling and embrace my identity. If MLB wants to reach out and appeal to new and diverse audiences, then having employees who represented those audiences is really important. And I added value to the organization by just being who I am, and I'm proud of that.
That's so cool. I love that. And I think there's so many of us out there in the world, and I certainly am one of them who suffer from that imposter syndrome, at least from time to time, right? And so I wanted you to share that because I want people to realize that there is a value in bringing a different perspective to things, and I think that's really important. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so you've brought this new perspective. You've been very successful there at MLB. You're now running the team for MLB TV, as I said, and you drive that strategy for the streaming service, which is so important at this time. Tell us about how you and your team use customer research techniques to understand what that streaming service should be.
Yeah. So we know that how people watch sports is changing rapidly. Cable is going out the door. Streaming services are all about on demand. And Gen Z audiences consume media very differently, and they're not old enough to join the workforce and be working at MLB themselves. So we cannot just rely on our own habits and patterns to guess what they want. So being on the front line with our customers and baseball fans is really important to us. And to do this, we use a range of methods depending on where we are with the software development process. So it's really important not to just rely on one because combined, these various methods really tell the whole story. So early in the process, we normally start with user interviews, diary studies, surveys, and this is when we are still in the discovery phase. As we move into development and building features, we look to unmoderated user testing and A B tests. And finally, once we're live, we validate our work by looking at our analytics and actual usage data to make sure that we met the goals that we originally set out to do. Usually, in our case, this is increasing the time that our fans spend watching baseball.
Okay, great. Really cool. I love how you've delineated the different, points in the process. That's really important. So let's dig into each one of these. Tell me more about user interviews. What tools have you found most successful in finding insights about what's going on with the audience and what they may want?
Sure. So for user interviews, we recruit participants in two ways. First, we directly reach out to users who complete our in-app surveys. And at the end of the survey, we prompt them with a question to see if they want to participate and offer them a $50 gift card as an incentive. This is great to create a pool of users we regularly get feedback from. It's also great to target users who have used a specific feature or watched specific content because we can just prompt them with a survey at the end of that experience. The second method we use is through usertesting.com. This is especially great when targeting potential users who don't necessarily use our platform today. It's also great if we want to find users who meet specific demographic or screening criteria. So, for example, if we want to understand how to get more college students to subscribe to MLB TV, we could screen for college students. So once we've recruited our participants, we try to talk to at least 5 users per study. And the conversations usually last about 20 minutes. It's nice to have a tool like usertesting.com that will automatically create a transcript for you. But if you're a smaller company or an entrepreneur, you can just do this for free with Zoom and maybe have another person join and take notes. A few tips if you're going to do this: it's worth the effort to prepare a script. Be very clear to yourself on the goals of the study or assumptions you want to validate, and then prepare questions that will get you there. Also, pay attention to leading questions. It's very tempting to want to hear the participants say good things about your product, but the more neutral you are, the more honest the feedback will be. You also don't want to seem too personally invested in the product. So, don't say that you're the product manager or that you built or designed the product. This may cause the participant to hold back feedback because they don't want to offend your work. So instead, focus on creating a comfortable environment, and this will get the participant to open up to you with honest feedback.
That is such incredible advice, and I hope everyone out there listening heeds that, because it's so easy to frame questions in a way or to almost bias the conversation, not intentionally, but it happens all the time. So I love that. So you mentioned diary studies. Tell us more about those.
Yes, so we've in the past asked a small set of people to keep a journal for a few months and send us notes once a week about how they use MLB's various technology products just as part of their daily life. These are less focused on a specific product or feature, but great to understand how baseball fans move between multiple devices, products, not just at MLB, but also with other sports sites and apps. And this type of study is great for discovering new opportunities and also for breaking down siloed thinking between product teams. So, for example, when a person is watching a baseball game on their TV, they often have their phone nearby, and then they're using their phone to look up standings and stats and player information. And this led us to thinking about our streaming app on a TV and the MLB phone app as a more unified experience, even though we actually have different product teams working on them.
That's a great example. I love that idea of diary studies. That's really cool. So surveys are always a big part of customer research. Tell us how you conduct your surveys and most importantly, make them effective.
Yes, so surveys are great to supplement your qualitative research because you can hear from a lot more people than you can talk to. So we've used Qualtrics for our surveys, but there are a lot of free tools out there. So some examples are SurveyMonkey, SurveyGizmo, Google Forms. And you have to think about whether you want to do an intercept or email survey. So intercept surveys prompt a user for feedback inside of your product, usually at the end of their journey. I like intercept surveys for getting information on specific features or experiences because of the immediate feedback and relevancy. It's still fresh in their mind. Email surveys are best to more generally assess what people think about your product, or if you're trying to collect a net promoter score or a customer satisfaction score. They're also great when you're researching for new features that haven't even been built yet. The one thing to note when you're making surveys is when you're designing them, design them to be measurable from the start. This way, after taking action, you can then repeat that survey and see if you positively or negatively impacted the score that you were measuring.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. So you mentioned these Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction score. So CSAT or NPS, do you have a preference?
Yeah, you can use both or you can pick one. Net Promoter Score, or NPS as it's often called, is really best to quantify long-term brand loyalty to your organization. So you've probably all come across this question at some point. It basically asks, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? And then you're asked to rate from a scale of 1 to 10. Now, if you're working at a company whose identity is synonymous with the product you're working on, this is really useful. But what happens at MLB is that users' answer is often influenced by what's happening with baseball as a whole, especially how their team is performing. So MLB TV, which is our streaming app, as a brand is lost within the larger MLB brand. So if we ask them, would you recommend us to a friend? They would say no, because, my team didn't make it to the postseason. So it's really hard to correlate this rating to our app. So we moved off NPS and we started using CSAT, or customer satisfaction score. And here we ask a question like, what do you think of this feature? And users answer using a 5-point scale from extremely satisfied to extremely unsatisfied. And this is helpful because we can make it more focused on a specific product within the brand, or even a very specific feature or user experience.
That's really, I love how you've kind of given examples there, because I think that's really important. And I definitely would give you a bad score if my Cubs didn't win. So I'm just kidding. I wouldn't, but I might if the Yankees didn't win. And I like the White Sox too, by the way. So, you can tell your husband that the Southsiders are cool too. Okay, so moving on. Sorry, I'm so excited. I love to have a sports person on here, even if you didn't start out as a sports person.
Right,
okay,
I'm
or a baseball person.
Now.
Yes, absolutely, you are. And your husband lives vicariously through you. Okay, so when do you move on to unmoderated user testing? When is that kind of a relevant thing to move to?
Yep. So this is great when you've built out functionality and want to make sure it's usable. That's when unmoderated user testing becomes handy. So you would create a set of tasks, make it very clear what successfully completing the task means, and provide an option for your user tester to give either written or verbal feedback at the end of the task. You can run these tests in person and ask users follow-up questions directly, or with unmoderated testing, which is my preference, all these actions are recorded so you can review them later. And this just makes the logistics of organizing them a lot easier. So we typically have at least about 20 people in a test. And it's great to quickly discover usability issues. You can really zone in on failed tasks or problem areas without rewatching tons of video recordings from start to finish. And you can also just skip through long pauses. You can watch them in 2 or 3x speed. It really saves you a ton of time.
That's great. Okay. And so finally, A/B testing, obviously very important. So how do you collect feedback using A/B testing?
Yes, this is one of the final tests we do in the cycle of software development, because to do the test, you need to have built out the new experience, or at least use smoke and mirrors to fake it to a user. So small changes like button colors, does a green buy button attract more clicks and in turn purchases of an MLB TV subscription than a red buy button? So you can easily test that using tools like Optimizely or Adobe Target, and not necessarily need any help from the engineering team. So you would split your traffic and give one segment the green button and the other segment the red button, and see which gets more clicks and ultimately conversions. Now, that's a very simple example, but you can also use this method for larger experiences to validate if you are indeed positively moving the metric that matters, and be very clear about the metric. So, for example, for us in the streaming space, it's watch time in minutes. So if we introduced a new feature like personalized game suggestions, we could run the old experience side by side with the personalized experience and validate that adding personalization is causing people to watch more baseball. And A/B testing like this is great for a couple of reasons. First, using a tool to split traffic and run the test in the exact same time period is really important to control for factors like time of day, content on the page, or even just how exciting the baseball game is at that given time. So by eliminating the noise from all these other factors, you can really prove that the change that you introduced is directly correlated to the outcome that you desire. And the second benefit is because of the large number of people you can involve in an A/B test, you can spot even small improvements in your metric. This is really hard to do with the earlier methods where your sample size is just too small. So, overall, as I said before, combining A B testing with all these different methods together will really help you construct that holistic story of what your audience wants and validate if you are successful at delivering value to that audience.
This has just been such a great, really, really important discussion. Thank you so much, Keerthi, for sharing practical, really good feedback and examples on how best to conduct customer research. I mean, again, as we started this podcast, I talked about how important this is, and these are the things that can really make an impact on understanding customers, but then ultimately optimizing your products and being successful. So, Keerthi Hoback, thank you so much for joining this conversation and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yes, absolutely. It was my pleasure to be here.
You bet. So, thank you all for joining us on Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. I am JJ Rory, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.